I think we need more private sector understanding and experience to solve problems in government. I think this administration has identified that. I think this administration has been correct on a lot of these picks, and it brings a new perspective. And I think we need that in having somebody that has been in, I'm going to say, the real world, and not, strictly as, a regulator or a political person. I think that's powerful. I mean, my background, I came from the private sector, and then I was a regulator, and now I'm a lawmaker. So I bring that experience from those different parts into what I do. And I think it's, I'm excited about this process, and I'm excited about seeing who makes it through this confirmation process.
Well, it's interesting. Some of the names that have been floated, when the president says 3 to 4, I'm assuming 2 of them are the Kevins. Hassett, Warsh, would you be happy with a Fed run by some of the names on the so-called short list right now?
Yeah, I think it'll be great. Obviously, we need to go through the process, and the president is being very thoughtful about this. His team is being very thoughtful. And then, the Senate, I'm sure, is going to, ask all the right questions to make sure that we're comfortable in that position to make that decision. But I would be very happy going through that process. I think this is a normal, necessary process, and we're going to get a big upgrade in that position.
Well, your view is important here as a member of the House Financial Services Committee.
Yes.
This list keeps growing. You're going to throw your hat in?
Oh, no, not for me. I've got work to do, and I'm excited about the work we are doing on financial services. But I am excited about seeing some change there and seeing what comes.
Jay Powell was a private sector guy at one time, as Ed Duffner reminds me.
There you go.
Look, I know you were not only in the private sector before, you were also in the military. You joined the Air Force following 9/11. You twice deployed to Afghanistan, and I think that your view on what's about to unfold on Friday is important to our viewers and listeners. Should Vladimir Putin be setting foot on a U.S. airbase in Alaska?
I'm not part of that decision process. I think it's obviously unusual, but I've got to give kudos to the president. The president, and you keep hearing the art of the deal, and the president knows how to get things done. And if this is the correct venue in him doing that process, I'm very supportive. We need to see this stop. We need to see this come to an end. We need to make sure that the killing, that the war stops, and that we can see peace there. And if this is the process that the president believes is appropriate, I'm supportive of that, and I'm really hopeful to see this come to an end, because it's just atrocious what we've seen happening in this now drawn out war, and we need to see it come to an end. And I really do believe that Donald Trump is the person who can bring this to a good conclusion.
As we always see before events like this, there's a gaming of expectations. I don't know what yours are here, if it's a ceasefire or just kind of an agreement to meet again, as we've been hearing from the White House. But I wonder your thoughts on secondary sanctions. They appear to be slowed down a bit and to make room for these talks to take place. But should countries buying Russian oil be punished for it if this goes nowhere?
I think that sanctions are a powerful tool, and I think we need to, personally keep our foot on the throttle on this. There's a bill that I have out there right now to stop Russian market manipulation in critical minerals. We produce platinum and palladium in my district, the only place in the United States of America. And so we've got the Stop Russian Manipulation Act to make sure that they can't affect the commodities markets by dumping platinum and palladium into these markets. I think that that's incredibly important to, continue to be very serious about these sanctions until we get the desired result out of Russia. And, if there's a slight tempering of that during a negotiation to get somebody to the table, I'm not particularly happy, but I understand why to get this done. And hopefully we can bring this to a conclusion, because one of our best tools right there is financial, and making sure that we do have meaningful sanctions to basically get the behavior that we want out of them.
I want to hear more about platinum and palladium in your state of Montana. This is really important stuff, and I suspect that you're talking to the administration about this. Is the federal government or the Trump administration specifically stepping up to help you protect those resources and, more importantly, harvest and process them?
Harvest and process. I like that. That second part that you said, processing, is obviously a big issue with all of our critical minerals, or metals. Everything that we're doing is we can pull a lot of stuff out of the ground that we don't have the capacity to actually turn into a usable material. So that's a big part of this equation, because we talk about being dependent on other nations, especially adversarial nations, on critical minerals, on all these things. But even the ones that we're pulling out of the ground, very often we have to send them abroad to have them processed. So I think that is something that we should be looking at in repatriating a lot of that processing. But I'll tell you, the critical minerals has obviously been a big part of the Trump administration's goals, making sure we're doing that right. And it comes down to a couple of things. For my district, it's obviously a big economic issue because it's jobs in Stillwater County and Yellowstone County. It's meaningful there. To not be able to continue pulling platinum and palladium out of the ground, but it's also national security issues. We can't be dependent on somebody else, anybody else in raw base material, and that's across the spectrum from rare earths to critical minerals to copper. Everything that we need to continue building the future. We need to be able to source it, if not directly from America, then to close allies. And I think that's incredibly important that we continue finding ways to solve those problems.
I'm really glad that we can talk about it because it's the linchpin to a deal with China when we consider the importance of rare earth minerals and magnets that we're trying to get access to in this country. And I know that a trade deal with China could take some time. It's been rather elusive, and it's, of course, the biggest economy after ours. So it's been basically put into a different category. But, Congressman, I wonder your thoughts on the tariff program as it stands now. We saw reciprocals go into place last week, and there have been a lot of questions about the impact on prices, whether it's a one-time shift or an inflationary trend. How do Montanans feel about this?
There has
how do your
been,
farmers feel about it?
Yeah, there's been so much fear-mongering in this space. And the truth of it is that it's working. I mean, you look at the CPI numbers that came out, almost completely unfazed by tariff issues. I think it was 3.7 down to 2.4, positive movement there, completely unfazed. You look at the money coming in from the tariffs and what that can do in bridging the gap in our national, everybody's talking about, adding to the deficit, adding to the debt. You see that money coming in and bridging that gap. And I think the last part that we need to start looking at is, you started this program talking about the Fed, and one of the biggest issues in growing that gap is debt service. And so really looking at interest rates, if we can start pulling that back, I think we can bridge that gap and start to see some positive numbers there. But one thing I want to point out is a lot of the policies that have come in this administration, going to tariff issues, going to the one big beautiful bill. A lot of this stuff has set the foundation for really charging the economy, but hasn't really gotten up to speed yet. Those tax cuts, I always say that the biggest driver to economic prosperity is access to capital. The best capital you can access is your own. If you're paying less in taxes, you start having more money in your pocket to start putting into the economy. That's the driver that bridges this gap.